Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Hobby Hammer podcast. That is Lloyd.
And that is Ben.
And
And
who's
I'm
this?
Alex.
Hey, it's FitHammer.
Hey,
Alex is our joint guest today. So,
yes, our first guest. We
of
should say
course,
we
it
did,
is.
we did,
I'm
we did
honored.
threaten on the first episode that we were going to get a guest on, and Alex has very kindly agreed to be the guinea pig. So who knows what's going to happen over the next next hour or so.
This will be fun. So, Alex, tell us why you're on the podcast. What was the premise for you being on the podcast today, other than just spending time with you,
Well,
obviously?
you just texted me and you said I am the best looking guy in the Warhammer community, and I couldn't say no to that. Couldn't disagree with you. So here I am.
Excellent. And
Yeah, no,
Wait, whoa,
that
whoa,
is.
whoa, 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 whoa! You text me to say I was the best looking guy in the Warhammer community, and that's why we do the podcast.
Wow.
I did secretly hope you wouldn't say
Wow.
that, Alex, but now you know my
Wow,
tactics. Just
bosh.
flattery.
That's how he gets you. You are not special. I'm not special. Wow.
You
I'm kind of special. My mother thinks I am. So.
That's all that matters. That's all that matters.
Um,
So
No, the real
obviously,
reason Ben
yeah,
invited me is to talk about Old World. I am very passionate about Old World. Love, love. I think it's the best Warhammer game currently. So I am going to talk to you guys about it and try to convince you to join me in the Warhammer Old World setting.
excellent. And I'm looking forward to this. And again, this is part of why this podcast has been created because we just want to get people who are passionate about what they're talking about. Again, we're not getting paid to do this. I wish we were, but we're not. This is all about just us being sharing our passions and this is a topic that we know a little bit about. Obviously, we've talked about it a bit on some of the previews and stuff like that. But Lloyd, we said this in last week's episode. We've fallen into this rhythm or groove where AOS guy,
Hmm.
Lloyd's the 40k guy, and now I think you're going to be the resident old world guy. So
Good,
yeah.
very good.
So
I'm
before we get
excited.
into that, we have a bit of a rumor mill to discuss. So, gentlemen, what do you think of this rumor mill? Uh, Something's
Well,
afoot.
something is afoot.
But it's
I had to.
But before we discuss this one, can I just claim absolute vindication on the shield generator for
Oh,
the
yes,
Imperial
yes.
Knight a couple of weeks ago?
You did bet
mm,
on that. You were like, I
And I
guarantee.
think that's going to the one from last week is going to be a Chaos Knight, like we said. So I think we're on for that. But this week I'm going to clue. So
No, no. So it's a foot. Um,
hmm.
Not much else other than there's oh, I actually just stole their pun. I didn't even realize there's something afoot this week.
Oh, no way.
I thought I
I
was
thought it
being
was
I
original.
thought I was being so
oh
original there.
dear, I thought you came up with that all on your own.
Yeah, I thought I was being so original, but no. Ah well. So I mean, what can you really take from this image? You've got the two bolts, you've got a segmented boot, you've got like a cloth ankle
It's called a gator.
a gaiter. There we go. So what what do we think? I mean, I'm gonna guess that just because of the grass tuft, I'm gonna guess this is AOS or Old World.
Ooh,
I don't think it's 40k. What do you think?
really? Hmm.
Just because of the grass, that's literally the only thing I'm going on. That's the only thing I have here because they don't typically have grass
That's a good
in
point.
40k because it's usually barren wastelands or battlefields. So I'm
It's all
thinking
it's all been napalmed out. There is no
exactly
grass. There is
grass
no grass in
survive.
the far future.
Yeah, so that's my thinking, but I doesn't look like Votan. Doesn't look like any of the things that are coming up on the latest release schedule. So it's not Salamander. It's not a Votan. Was the other one that was coming out on that? Was it the Fists, Imperial Fists? So it's
Hmm.
none of those. I think this
I
is.
think I'm going to go against you here, Ben, and I'm going to say I think that could be Votan.
Hmm.
I think it could be 40k. And the thing that swings it to me 40k is those two bolts in the middle
Yeah.
of
Yeah,
the
yeah.
shoe.
Bolts look
That's
pretty.
that's what swings it to me is to being potentially 40k, and I think that could be a new Votan model. Although having said that, they've all got those pressure suits which kind of go right down to the bottom of the boots. So perhaps I've just talked myself out of it as well, but I do think it's 40k.
Well, I mean, this is exactly what it's for. Alex, what do you think? Any?
I think it's 40k as well. Those two rivets definitely don't scream fantasy and don't really scream AOS unless you are like Herodron. And even then doesn't look stocky enough to be a dwarf or Doadran to me. So
Yeah.
I'm thinking 40k and I'm thinking something human related. So either Imperial Guard or maybe one of the Kill Team factions, I'm not sure, but some kind of a human foot.
Yeah, it's too thin, dainty at the ankle for a squat, right? Or a dwarf,
Hmm
sorry. You know what? Actually, yeah, I might go back on what I said because yeah, you're right. Like the pattern of that
Peer
doesn't
pressure, baby.
really. Yeah, I've just been peer pressured into this now. But yeah, now I'm looking at that. Like that does not look like a forge designed piece of armor. That looks like it's been, there's like been quite a bit of uh design to that. It
Like a
doesn't look like a
flame.
blacksmith just beat that out with a hammer. That looks like it's been
Hmm
produced, mass produced
Yeah.
potentially. So
Too clean.
yeah, yeah, that's it. That's it too.
Yep.
So there
Excellent.
we are. I mean, that's last week's rumor engine. So let us know in the comments what you think it might be and whether we're on the right track or whether we're just absolutely talking rubbish, which there's a very high possibility of. So let's move on to this week's pre-orders. We've got Soulblight Gravelords.
Mhm.
Woo,
They do
skeletons.
look good.
Yeah. Alex, what did you think of these skeletons then?
I love Soulblight. If I start a new AOS army, it probably would be Soulblight. Probably monster heavy more than skeletons.
Yeah.
However, yeah, I think the new dragon, the what's a Prince Fordy?
Or dry? Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's beautiful. No, I would probably center my army around that new model with the dragon. But yeah, I'm very excited to see the release. And if I do get my mojo for Age of Sigmar back from Fantasy, that's probably an army I would start.
Yeah, yeah. And
So that's two of your top three models of 2025 so far. So if you watched last week's pod where we did our favorite Warhammer models of 2025 so far,
Hmm
Ben's top two were in this list. So tell us, Ben, which ones were they?
so it's the Vampire Lord on Nightmare Steed, which I just think I think it looks amazing. And what really surprised me was the actual size of the model. I thought it was going to be a base size, maybe like Varangard, slightly
Mm.
bigger than the standard cavalry, but it's actually like a circular bit. It is big. It is a big model. Again, I think it's one of those models that's just got so much potential for, and again, I spoke to my friend Sean about this, the Emperor's Paintbrush. We were saying how this could be a Golden Demon painting
Yeah.
job for a lot of people. Very cinematic looking, very thematic looking. Couple little
Mm.
changes you can make to it, but yeah, definitely one of my favorites. And I share that sentiment, Alex, that Soulblight Gravelords have. Again, whenever I initially saw them, this box came out, I was like, okay, cool. But then the more I started looking at the models, I was like, this is actually pretty cool. And I recently
Yeah.
just finished listening to the Kato Isakal book.
Ah.
So I finished that the other day. So that was a nice little bonus. That's something I'd suggest, by the way, just randomly out of the blue here. If you are looking to get into an army, highly suggest listening to any of their books because it'll kind of tell you whether that's actually an army you want to get into. So if you are stuck in that point of which army do I go, get a book. If you're stuck between two choices, get a book of one, book of the other, listen to it, read it, whatever you want, and that will kind of tell you whether you're into that army or not. So yeah, I'm pretty excited to see how the Soulblight go, and I really want to see a Vordry list with just
Yeah.
dragons. I
Yeah.
just want to see just zombie dragons. That's going to look so
Excited for that.
cool. Yeah, very, very cool.
Yeah.
Lloyd,
Monster heavy
what about you?
list. Scary. That'll be cool.
I really like the Vaudreuil model. I think it's a great model. On the subject of Golden Demon entries, KDO Ezekar, the original Hollow King model, that has been done and done and done. And in fact, was a Slayer Sword winner not last year, the year before in Adepticon with Aleks dos Santos. Did that, which is a
Mhm.
fantastic. Um, it was flipped, so you had the kind of the scene, but then you also had the reflection of the scene as well, which obviously was different because he's vampires, so doesn't have a reflection. It was like
That's
Oh,
cool.
amazingly well done. It was such a cool piece. But obviously, there's the Blades of the Hollow King out, so that's a nice little box set with the three models in there as well. I think the Nightmare Steed is cool, but my favorite out of all the kind of the Soulblight stuff is I really like the Soulblight aesthetic. I really like the vampire aesthetic that we've got in Soulblight. But it's those Barrow Guard. I just love the new
Mm.
Barrow Guard that they've done. And the old kind of Death Rattles, or I say old, they're still fairly new. Death Rattle skeletons as well. I just think they're such a lovely looking pair of kits to form the kind of like the core of your army. I really, really like them.
if you just changed one of the letters in that word, it would have been a very different sentence. I'm just saying. You're listening back, you know what I mean? I
Yeah,
just heard that
we'll pick that up in the edit. Wink,
Yeah, yeah,
wink.
yeah, yeah. So,
Um,
any other releases this week? This I think it's just the Soulblight, isn't it?
Just the
Um,
Soulblight. Oh, there's the Knives of the Crone from Warhammer Underworlds, which basically look like some dark elves.
yeah.
yeah, Daughters of Cain, right?
Yeah, Daughters of Cain.
Yep, very cool.
Yes, yes, I see them now. Yeah, Underworlds. Is that much? Does anyone else? Does anyone have any experience with Underworlds? I don't personally, but Alex, you?
What Underworlds is cool models to use in AOS. That's
That's
what it is. I have
yeah,
literally, I've never met anybody who buys Underworlds models who actually plays Underworlds.
yeah. Because I got the
Yeah.
vampire. I think it was the Vampires 4 Soulblight,
Yep.
the big mace.
Oh, the Crimson Court.
It looks
They
smooth.
are a great set of models.
Yeah, I was
Lovely.
actually told by the guy in Games Workshop I was going to pick up the vampire, the standard guy, and he's like, for the same price. I think it was actually cheaper.
Yeah.
This one, and then you get like four models rather than
Yeah.
one. So shout
That's
out.
exactly what you do. I recently bought the Gloomspite Gits one, and I'm actually going to use it for my Nine Goblin army for fantasy because they're just beautiful kits. They're phenomenal.
I think you've just had a perfect little segue into the main section there,
That's a
Alex.
great segue into the main section, I
So
think.
10 is it
That's nice.
I'm done. See
Um,
you guys.
well done. I'm going to pick up Old World. Bye.
Ciao for
So
now. I think it's so. Alex, you're going to give us ten reasons why we should why we should get involved in the old world and fancy. But before we kind of just very quickly jump into that, Ben, where are you at when it comes to old world and fancy? How if on a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being I'm completely committed and invested in getting involved in old world, where would you say you were on that scale?
I like this. I think I'm like 4.5. I'm so close to just
Okay.
tipping over the
Okay.
edge. I'm I'm just gently flirting with the idea. I'm like peeking my nose over the fence at it right now, so you can see like this much of my face. Your job is to get my whole body over that fence today, Alex. Lloyd,
I'll do
what
my
about you?
best.
What about you?
Well, I'm a bit older than you. And I remember when I used to play 40k back in fifth edition in Warhammer in Cardiff, and it was you had a 40k army, you had a Warhammer fantasy army. I never quite got a fantasy army, but I have got the Bretonnian starter box because I
Uh-huh.
love the Bretonnians,
Okay.
and I've got a very hefty collection of high elves as well. So I'd probably say Alex is going to have to do very little work to tip me over the
Good. Good.
precipice.
Gentle prod.
Maybe just a gentle, and I'll be gone. Yes, so there
Good.
we are. So that's where we're at. And I hope if you, when you're watching this, let us know in the comments as well. Kind of like how committed do you like Old World? Do you not like Old World? And I'm really excited to hear Alex's 10 reasons because I've also got a few reasons of my own actually, uh,
Excellent.
which I hope might convince some people. But I'd be really keen to see if Alex, you've actually kind of already covered them. So let's go for it.
All right, excellent. The first segment we'll have is setting slash lore. So the first reason I have for you is you have classic fantasy armies that make sense,
Mhm.
right? So when I say dwarves, what do you think?
Standard kind of Tolkien-esque wars,
Yeah,
Yeah,
dwarves.
builders,
small dudes, heavy armor,
slower,
artillery.
probably quite slow.
Exactly. Slow, stout, heavy armor, great artillery, best in the game, right? That's what dwarves are, right? Great engineers, anti-magic. They hate magic. They hate elves, right? So that's what dwarves are. When you think elves, what do you think?
Graceful, dangerous, maybe fast, but not super durable, but highly skilled.
I really like high elves, and they're my favorite race to play in Total War Warhammer 2 as well on the old PC. I do like the old elves, I have to say.
Yeah, beautiful, exactly. So they are very fast. They hit like a fire truck, but anything that they did not kill can also easily kill them. They are toughness 3 across the board. To give you some reference, dwarves are at least toughness 4 across the board. The weakest, smallest dwarf warrior will be toughness 4, where a high elf lord will be toughness 3,
Wow.
right? So it just makes sense. Elves are good at magic. Humans, right? Humans are not great at anything, but they're good at everything,
Yeah.
right? They also have a strength in numbers. They don't have the best cavalry, the best shooting, the best magic, the best of anything in the game, but they have everything,
Hmm.
right? A bit of everything, so you can do anything you want. So you have classic armies that make sense, but you also have enough unique armies to add flavor, right? So things like lizardmen. Oh, what are those? We have Aztecs and we have lizards. We mix them together. We have lizardmen. We also have chaos. Chaos is super flavorful, right? I would say chaos is as flavorful as it is in any other Warhammer setting. It is probably the most flavorful faction in Old World. We have things like vampire counts, right? Vampire counts, they have their own flavor rules, so they will never flee. They will never actually flee off the board. They will just crumble instead. So you have classic armies that make sense and enough unique flavor to also give you options if you don't want to go with classic armies.
I like it. I like that
Okay.
so far. All right. I'm being tickled. Okay.
All right. Okay. Good, good,
My
good.
nose is a little bit higher over this dice. Now my nose. No, it's just my nose. Okay.
All right. Number two is armies are relatable. What I mean by that is the whole world is loosely based on our own geography and history,
That's right. I think I remember seeing
right?
this actually. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So we have Empire, which are basically Germans,
Okay.
right? Germans, maybe a little bit of English, but mostly Germans. Then we have Britannia, which is literally French, not even fantasy French. It's just French,
It's French, totally
right?
French.
And English because there is King Arthur and kind of the Holy
Arthurian
Grail
legend.
and
Yeah, it's heavily based on that, isn't it?
right, 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 right. But there's also enough fantasy flair to it because they'll have Pegasus, Empire will have demigryphs and griffins and magic and steam tanks. So it's a big mix. We have dwarves, which are very much classically Nordic inspired peoples. They will have kind of Viking style helmets, and that's kind of general art. We have Cathay, the new faction, which is obviously China, right?
Hmm.
And then hopefully in the future, where we'll have Kislev, which is Poland and Russia and Eastern Europe all mixed together. So
Very good for
armies
you.
are relatable, right? In AOS, armies try to be relatable, but it can't really relate to humans because they are a hodgepodge of all different cultures, which is great for AOS, but it's also nice to have armies that can actually be inspired and related to.
Mhm. I get
Okay,
that.
that's reason number
So,
two.
so I think probably good to just have little moments here where we can ask you a couple questions. So,
Mhm. Yeah, yeah.
what is it that you like about that clean cut like differentiation between the armies? Like I get that as well, but like what is it that you like about that? Like this is this, there's the blurring of the lines that you see. And I understand what you mean by
Hmm.
AOS because you got dwarves in the AOS setting, you got fire slayers, and then you
Yes,
got the Caradron overlords, neither of which I don't think fall into this classic dwarf stereotype, which is
no,
cool, but also I think most people, like you said, will have those stereotypes. Basically, Tolkien inspires. That's
right. Tolkien,
obviously
right.
the grandfather of all fantasy. But
Hmm.
I get that of you know what you're getting when you pick an army. Whereas if someone goes, I like dwarves, and then you show them Caradron overlords, they're like, that's
Right.
not dwarves. That's
Exactly.
they are dwarves, but that's not the standard fan. So what is it that
Exactly.
you like about that clear cut, different?
I think it's just it's something I can already relate to, right? Because I have a vision in my mind of what dwarves should be, and it gives me it scratches that itch, right? That I have because I do have a friend who loves dwarves, but he just does not like AOS any dwarves because they are just a bit too unique. And all of those concepts, by the way, so everything that AOS exists in the classic fantasy dwarves,
Mhm.
right? So you have gyrocopters and gyrobombers. Well, that's just Caradron, right? And you have slayers, literally slayers, and that's what you have with fire slayers.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, you have a whole Gotrek thing going on in the Mortal Realms, where he used to be a slayer in the old world, and now he is a fire slayer, even though not really in the AOS setting.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it's classic fantasy. It scratches that itch of a almost like a low to regular fantasy instead of high fantasy.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So that's
I was
interesting.
going to say that difference in because like Age of Sigmar is kind of more high fantasy, isn't it?
Yes.
Whereas old world, like you said, it's like just that low fantasy,
Yes.
which is a really nice, clean aesthetic as well on it.
It's more similar to Tolkien, which I think
Mm.
is a lot of us got into Warhammer setting because of Tolkien,
Yep.
right? So it kind of itches that classic feel.
Yeah, it's
Cool.
that the I think one of the biggest things when anyone's getting into anything at all is their comprehension of that
Hmm.
thing they're getting into.
Hmm.
That, and I think that's the biggest stumbling point for a lot of people when they're getting into anything new is that
Yes.
how do I comprehend this? Like fitness is an example. Like
Hmm.
we can talk about all the super complex stuffs, but if someone can't actually comprehend what we're talking about, it's useless. So I think
Right.
that allows that like first initial step getting into the hobby of like, okay, I have a base level understanding of
Things
what's
make
going
sense.
on, and yeah, so I think that that probably plays in quite well to it. So
Yep. Things make sense, but also there's enough uniqueness to it because you look at elves in Tolkien setting, there's still a lot of unique design and lore and units that are very unique to Warhammer,
hmm,
right? So it takes the baseline that you already might have in your mind and then adds on top of that.
it's cool. I do like that.
Yeah.
Flying dragons.
Right.
Dragons.
Yeah, yeah.
Love the dragons. Uh, then we have deep, rich lore, right? So that's older than 40K because fantasy came out before sci-fi with the Citadel miniatures and Games Workshop and Warhammer. So the lore goes very far. So I personally I like the lore, but that's not why I love the game. But if that's a reason that helps you enjoy the game, there's a lot of it, right? There's so many books and so much history that they just had to kind of re-release. They don't have to add anything to it. Most of us got into fantasy in probably sixth, seventh, eighth edition. I got in seventh edition, and that lore is still there, right? So if you do like an army and you want to dive deeper with something like Age of Sigmar, it's great, but the lore is very limited,
True.
right? With fantasy, with playing Old World, you have years of lore to catch up on.
Hmm.
I like that.
Yeah.
I like that. And the lore is one of those things. Like Lloyd, what do you like? Is Lloyd? Is Lloyd? Has lore ever been something that has been one of the things you would grab at like quite a bit,
Do you
or
know what? It's interesting actually. I think I'm more drawn to things like so if I look at the factions that kind of interest me or inspire me. So we've got the High Elves, we've got Bretonnians, for example, and I've always kind of swayed towards the Bretonnians because of that kind of Arthurian theme that they've got going on. But the thing I really
Yes.
like about that is the same thing I really like about Space Marines. It's all the heraldry. So it's all the individual heraldry of the lords and the different colors and the brightness and the ridiculousness and that kind of that's the thing that appeals to me. So it's kind of I'd say it's lore adjacent, I
Sure.
guess, in
Sure.
terms of what how I look at it. But also then with the high elves as well, it's those stacked ranks of spearmen, it's the banners, it's the different banners, it's all that kind of
that one
thing.
side of your brain?
That's the thing that appeals to like the organized side of my brain that I kind of really focus on and like to get involved in and know more about, I guess. One of my favorite books is Insignium Astartes, which you
Mm,
may or may not know about, but it came out probably in, I want to say the early 2000s.
mm.
And it's basically a full-on book about all the different insignia for the Space Marines, different
Wow.
ranks, different regiments, different companies, and it's all the different company markings that he'd ever done. So that's my kind of jam. And that's why I like, so with Old World, specifically the what are they called? The kind of little army books you get. They're not
So
battle.
the
Uh,
arcane journals.
Arcane journals, yeah. So the Arcane Journal for Bretonia, for example, is brilliant because it just
Sure.
got loads of different iconography, explains how you use different devices and how lords can allow their chat, and then that just helps you create that really unique army on the tabletop. So
Yeah.
that's what kind of really appeals to me on it.
That's very
I
cool.
think you would really like Empire because
Oh yeah,
Empire is a collection
I
of
think
states
yeah, yeah,
which are
yeah,
very
yeah.
unique, very flavorful. I think you would love that.
So for me, the lore was something that I really didn't really touch for a long time until one of my friends when I got back into Warhammer, like kind of the third coming of my Warhammer, which I've now sustained since then. But the reason why I got into it so much more this recent time was because my friend was we're playing a game of AOS and he was explaining to me the background of this one model he had, and I was like, whoa, that's really cool. Like I didn't
Super
know
cool.
anything about I just saw model, different type of model, stronger model, faster model,
Right.
shooting model, fighting model. That's how I kind of saw it. But whenever I started learning a bit more about the lore, oh my word, it just kicked the door open for my enthusiasm for this. And now the lore is one of the things that I think I enjoy the most
Yeah.
out of everything. So the fact that there's this depth of lore in like old world, and the fact that there's almost again AOS guy, put my AOS hat on. I
Sure.
think the fact that if you know a bit about old world, you almost
Oh,
understand AOS even
for
more.
sure. For sure.
Kind of like a force multiplier for
Absolutely.
that desire to learn. So that's
I've
big.
just remembered actually the last Black Library book I read was Lords of the Lance, which is a Bretonian one for
Yes,
the
that's
old world.
awesome. How was
And
that? I didn't read it.
Yeah, it's good. It basically sets, so you've got the two launch boxes, you've got the Tomb King
Yes.
and the Bretonnia boxes.
Yes.
It basically sets up the conflict between the two armies that you've got in those boxes. So yeah,
That's cool.
it's a chunky one actually, but it was really good. And I think yeah, it's like most Black Tigers, it get a little ridiculous in some places, but
Sure.
it was quite enjoyable, and it does kind of really encapsulate the Bretonian knightly order, or the knightly attitudes quite nicely and really well. And it just made me want to paint a Cornell army, which is the blue with the unicorn crest. So see what happens.
That's awesome. Wow, I don't think I have to convince you, Lloyd, not gonna lie.
No, no, you don't. To be honest, I was like I said, I put it 9.9 out of 10.
I'd say both of
It's
you are
comparing
standing. If
to
we're going with this fence analogy, I feel like I'm like now like getting mustache. You can just see
Right,
the
right, 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 right.
and you two are both just standing, and the other I'm just
It was
I'm
waiting for
imagining a
you to come
barbecue.
over.
I'm just like you're standing at the barbecue, like what the heck is Ben
Oh, that's
doing?
great.
We'll just come over. I'll be like, tell me more about what's on the barbecue.
Oh, all right. So that will be the setting and lore segment. Moving on to miniatures and hobby segment.
my
So
favorite.
what you have in Old World, Warhammer the Old World, is an amazing mix of new, classic, and old school models. And I love that they just didn't just release what you had available in Fantasy 8th edition. They released things from 7th, 6th, 5th edition, stuff that I've never even seen before ever. They've re-released to be able to use in your armies. So basically, they just gave you all the toys that you've always wanted that you didn't have,
Like that.
right? So I would say the amount of availability you have for your army is greater than I've ever experienced. So I'm super excited.
Yep. Okay.
Yeah. Yes, it's a large amount of options. Also, generally, the old world community is much more open to third-party 3D printed armies, partially because not everything is available.
Fair.
The fact is, not every unit type is available. Not every single option is available in minis just because they're limited, maybe so far at least. So it's well accepted. So if you want to have a more affordable army, or you just prefer to have an army that's consistent in the way it looks, you also have that option.
I like that. I like that. So, am I right in saying there's some models? Again, I'm just thinking of this as like a childhood because, or from like a childhood perspective, I remember. I think a lot of the people who are listening to this, if they're around our age, probably remembers going into the Games Workshop or the hobby store, friendly local hobby store, and seeing a bunch of models that were just out of their price range at that point. It
Hmm.
was that kind of scratching that itch of, I'm now a grown ass man. I can
Yep,
buy whatever I want.
exactly. Exactly. I
That's a
have big
nice
boy
feeling.
money.
Yeah, it's my money. No one's going to shout at me for buying this piece of metal.
Exactly. And yeah, and honestly, Old World is relatively inexpensive to start and get into. Their start collecting kits are very, very affordable. But if you want all the toys, it can get pretty pricey.
Hmm.
Yeah.
We know. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I don't know where else we're going to kind of go on the modeling, so I don't want to steal any of your thunder, Alex. But one of the things that really appeals to me with Old World is the simplicity of the models. So I
Mm,
predominantly exist in a painting world,
right.
and I predominantly paint. I don't play, so it's all about the painting with me. Now, when it comes to the old world models, they are so simple to paint because
Yeah.
there's just hardly any detail on them, which is it's kind of for me, it's the charm of the models as well. And we were talking, one of chatting with some friends, and again, like if you talk about high elves, the sword masters of Hoth, for example,
Yeah.
amazing looking models, one piece.
Yeah.
They're a one piece model.
Beautiful. I love it. Yeah.
Do you know what I
Oh,
mean?
that's cool.
So
Mhm.
I've got one here. Do you know? So for me, there's a sword
Yep.
master of
Oh yeah, yeah,
Hoth.
yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
Beautiful.
but that's a one piece model, and you've got it's just from a hobby point of view, it just makes it so much more enjoyable than
Yes.
painting or trying to build something. If we look at some of the other models we've built recently, like building Fulgrim, how many bits Fulgrim was.
Right.
So for me, that's a huge plus, is that they're simple, they've got
Mhm.
that old school charm a little bit, but also they're really simple to paint.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, they definitely have very different style to AOS and 40K, where
Mm.
models, that's kind of their selling point. Like they're
Yeah,
modeling company, they're a miniature company. So they do have beautiful, complex models. But once again, because we are not in a high fantasy setting, we're kind of in the low, no, to regular fantasy, more grounded. They don't have to be complex, which I love.
yeah.
I do like that. That is a big part of it as well.
I
Is just
will ask a question as well as Aleks. I mean, we spoke about Cathay when we did kind of the show. We covered the Adepticon reveals. I think we both felt that Cathay looks amazing, looks fantastic, but is it actually going to be a lot more complex in terms of the models and the design that's used versus the fantasy? I mean, what do you kind of think about that with a new, completely new range coming in?
Yeah, I don't think they're too complex, honestly. I think they, in my opinion, right? Because when looking, I think there's a big disparity within the army itself. Because like when you look at the foot soldiers, in my opinion, they do fit pretty well with
Mm.
the other fantasy models. Some of like the dragons and the hero models are a bit more designed, or maybe over designed a little bit, but I don't think it's going to be a problem. The reality is we have stuff that looks goofy from metal models from
Mm.
fifth edition, and we have things that just came out. So it's part of the charm of the game, I think, to have models that don't necessarily fit like they came out in the same 10-year period.
yeah, and on top of that as well is like they have all this technology that I think they would have loved to have had back in the day. They just didn't have it.
Yeah.
So it's like the design team, in order for them to keep the same aesthetic as they would have, it'd be like tying their arms behind their backs
Mm.
Right.
or
Right.
giving
Yeah,
us
don't do
old
that.
school
I
that
think, yeah, I think for me, I think I'm a little worried that they're going to be a little bit too complex. And the
Oh
example I'll
God.
give
Yeah.
to kind of make that argument is if you look at the Bretonnian range, they released that questing knight,
Yes.
and it is so covered in that necessary detail on its backpack and stuff like
Yeah.
that. It's just like it's oh we've done it because we can. Whereas it could have
Right.
just been a lot more sleeker model with a lot less detail and still looked amazing. So I think
Yeah.
that's just like for me, it's like, well, we're gonna put too much on it and that kind of stuff. So I just like I said, don't get me wrong, I love the range. Can't wait to hopefully paint some of it. But I just like, is it going to go too far? And that's fine because we're kind of used to it with 40k
Sure.
and
Sure.
AOS, but is it just going to take some of the charm? I don't know. We'll see. Until we've got them in hand, we don't really know.
I'm personally not too worried about it. I love seeing the variety of models on the tabletop. Like in my armies, we have a local shop here that occasionally will go through his like backlog of minis from the last 40 years of him being a shop, and I'll get like first edition Skaven warriors, and they're like metal, chunky, and I will mix them with my Skaven warriors, like the modern ones, because to me it adds more charm.
Hmm.
Like my
Yeah,
command, like literally just bought Stormvermin command set. So they're going
yeah.
to lead my modern Stormrim and they're going to look way out of place, but I love that. So I think that's actually part of the charm of the game is to have things that are mix and match. Yeah, having a whole new army come out because we never actually had any, I don't think any Cathay models, maybe like a couple.
Mm.
So it's an entirely new army, so it is going to look a bit more consistent than maybe some of the other armies on the tabletop.
do you think
All right,
Sweet. Next point.
next point. Yes.
Let's get Ben
So
over the fence.
yeah,
yeah.
let's give
So
it
this is
yeah.
one of my favorite points is miniature customization and conversions are encouraged heavily, right? Because you have so many different options like and actually we'll move on to the next point in a little bit, but you have so many options with customization, especially for heroes, right? You have artifacts and weapons and magic
Mm.
items and armor and magic carpets you can fly on, right? So you have so many options that customization is not only is part of the game, but is actually heavily encouraged.
Mm.
So correct me if I'm wrong here, but it would be very difficult to find someone else with your exact army in Old World.
It will be challenging. It
Yeah.
will be challenging.
Maybe
Yeah,
different
especially with
with
the heroes.
Cathay, but the older ones,
Mm.
like the ones you were saying, whereas in AOS 40k, that's going to be most people are going to have fairly similar units in their
Right.
army, fairly similar. I would say if you went to a tournament, a fairly big tournament, it wouldn't be hard to find someone else who plays your army who has 90% of the models you have,
Right.
whereas Old World, from what I can gather, that's your army.
That's very true, especially because we now have modern AOS armies, and a
Mhm.
lot of people, myself included, will take some units from AOS and make it part of their fantasy army.
Yeah.
For example, I could buy the old school squigs, the metal ones, right, from Games Workshop, or I could use the
Mhm.
new squig models, which look much better, and they fit on the same base. So why wouldn't I do that?
I like that.
But somebody might like the old school look more. Like I have a friend, Mark, who plays goblins as well, and he has the old school goblins, all good old school squig hoppers. So he uses those, and they look beautiful.
I like it.
Yeah.
Very personalized,
So
very custom. I like it.
a lot of customization, a lot of conversions in the army.
I'm gonna hold that point. I'm gonna hold that point
Yes.
because I think it's one of the things that puts me off a little bit. It's that point one where I'm like, oh, I don't know. Is that there's so much customization. When you look at the Arcane Journal, you've got all these different things that you can use. Like I'm not a simple man, but I'm not a complex man. So I
Overwhelmed.
just get a little bit
Yeah.
like, oh my God, how many different magical items are there? But I like the point, and I like the fact that you can customize it and make it your own, even if it's just like you take talk like units of renown and things like that. Even if you want to make your own unit of
Yeah.
renown, where you just want to put some cloaks on your models so they're a
Hmm.
little bit extra special. It's really cool. I like that. But the flip side of that is the fact that I feel for me, it just makes it a little more complex. So perhaps we'll talk about that later.
Mhm.
And in general, it's encouraged, but it's not required,
Hmm.
right? So the WYSIWYG, what you see is what you
What
get,
you see is what you
is
get, yeah.
not as, from what I've experienced at least, is not heavily forced. I think there are some tournaments that do it, but certainly in casual play, certainly on game days, and most tournaments that I've seen, like as long as I say, hey, this guy has a big hammer, but he's modeled with a staff, it's fine. Just tell me what magic item he has. So it's
Hmm.
encouraged, but from what I've seen, it's not required.
This is a
Yeah.
quick one. Were you joking about a magic carpet? Is that a
No,
legitimate
no,
thing?
it's a real thing.
What army gets
It's
that?
no, it's a common magic item. So anybody has access to buy a magic carpet. I think it's 50 points. So it's pretty expensive and you can fly. You just have a fly rule.
That's pretty cool.
You can
Another
make
cool
that
thing
pretty
I'll just
easily
mention
out of
now.
a bit of can as well. Cut a bit of aluminium can up. You can make a nice little
Oh,
carpet
Yeah.
easily.
Or you could like get a, if you play Zine Charmy, get a screamer of some kind, or you can get a flying squig for goblins, right? It doesn't have to be a carpet. It can be like that's where customization comes in. I can do whatever I want. Hey, this is my guy on a flying squig. That's a magic carpet. Oh, it
you
makes
can like,
sense. Great.
yeah,
Right.
you give them like
I,
Hermes
I'll
boots.
I'll mention another fun item right now is a wizarding hat. I think it's a 40-point item. So anybody you give it to becomes a level one wizard, but because they're so overwhelmed by the voices in their head, they get stupidity rule.
So with level one wizard, that means you get to cast one spell, but then there's
Mhm.
a an overwhelm of all that magic because it's just the hat. You're not an actual
Yep, talking
wizard.
in your mind. Yep.
What is that? What is that? Are we going to talk about gameplay in a minute? Should we do that
We
later?
can, but not heavily. So stupidity, basically, you have to pass a leadership test, and if you don't, you can't do anything. The only thing you could do is move forward in a straight line.
That's amazing. I do like that.
That's beautiful.
That's
On the
really
subject of wizards as well, the one of the all-time rarest classic Citadel models is Gandalf with a machine gun, or a wizard with a machine gun,
Yeah,
isn't
that's
it?
right.
Have you not seen that, Ben?
I hold on. I'm
We're,
gonna get
we're
back
gonna
to
have to
it.
we'll have to dig this out to see if we can find it to go on to the
Oh,
or once we edit it, we'll put a photo of it if we can find one. But yeah, it's
beautiful.
basically a wizard with a machine gun. It's
I
one of like
love
the
that.
earliest Citadel models.
That's
So
great. Yeah,
anyway,
we don't have
while
that
Ben
in
is kind
Hammer's
of searching
Influencer.
the internet for that, let's go. What's the next reason,
All
Alex?
right, so moving on to list building is we have kind of what we just talked about, an amazing in-depth list building down to the last singular point, right? How many times you have army building, at least in iOS that I've experienced, where I have 10 points left, 20 points left, 30 points left. You will never have more than 2 points left, and usually not even that, building an old world army, right? If I have a point left, I'm gonna give my squig herder a spear. If I have 2 points left, I'm gonna upgrade light armor to a heavy armor on my unit champion or my hero,
Hmm.
right? So you have so much customization. So units can choose to have their command group and not just full command. I can choose to have a BSB, or I could choose to have a unit champion, or I could choose to have a musician, or all three, all two in any order that I want. I can choose to have a unit with spears or spears and bows or light armor or heavy armor. So you can heavily customize your units and they have special rules you can give them. For example, you can take Skaven Night Runners and instead of having 10 points per model, they can be 15 points per model if I give them all the special abilities and rules, or you can keep them cheap and basic.
Oh,
So heavy customization for units, for heroes, for weapons, for armor, for abilities, right? So give them scouts rules so they can move before the game starts. You can give them skirmisher rules so they can get and be set up behind enemy lines. A lot of different abilities. I think I actually messed those up, but you get the idea that you have so much customization. It can be too much when you're getting in the game, but if you're planning to play the game for months and years, it gives you so much freedom and options to explore.
I
I
think that's where I struggle a little bit because I don't know enough about what the
sure.
customization is and what they do, but I do really like the fact that because I'm just thinking, I was looking at like building a high elf list, for example. So if I take a high elf lord on a dragon, you've got different kinds of dragons, and then you've got the
Yes.
different armor options, different weapon options, different
Yes.
magic item options. It is really kind of you can make it completely bespoke. And I
Yep.
suppose that also links back into the last point you made about the customization.
Hmm.
Is if you've got a particular model which has got these additional things, or they've got extra plate armor, you could potentially model them with that as well. So it wouldn't necessarily be like the standard out of the box model. So I think that's like I get that and I like that. And I think where my kind of hesitancy just comes from not really understanding it or taking the time to understand it.
Right. The first few games I played, I'm like, what am I doing? What are these rules? I have no idea. So you just make a list, you go with it. But then the beautiful thing is literally every game I play, I will change things up because I've learned something new or I want to switch something, I want to try a new thing. So you'll never get tired of list building.
Hmm.
I that okay, so I'm not up to about here. You can I'm near nipple height now on this one. First of all,
You don't get it. What you don't catch him?
I did see
That is
Yeah,
awesome.
there it is. Wizard with a machine gun.
that's very cool. But what you're saying there, Alex, as well, and I share Lloyd's opinion on this, is that it can seem overwhelming. But I think, as you said, like the more repetitions you get, the more customization you can get. And the cool thing I like from that, what really, again, that got me up to chest height, was the fact that you can take a unit, and in AOS, for example, and 40k, that unit can do its job.
Yep, that's it.
That's it. Whereas, from what I'm gathering, you can take a unit that has a job, but you can also give it a different function within that. So, because one of the things I was saying is that model ranges, in terms of expansion, you're kind of limited in what you've got. Like, there's not going to be any new dwarves probably coming out anytime soon,
Right, right.
but you can take a unit and give it much more variety, despite the unit not actually changing, which that to me extends the amount of gameplay you can get and might potentially stop you from wanting to just get more and more models because, like for Skaven, for example, if I need fast attack, if I don't have a fast attack unit or anything that can move faster, that I have to get a fast attack unit. Where it sounds like what you
Yeah.
were saying, you give a unit scouts, skirmisher, I think it was skirmisher.
Yep.
You can give them multiple functions on the board, despite them being. It
100%.
basically has like a bunch of like a spider diagram. Also, you got the base, and then you can go
Absolutely.
this way, this way. That's very cool. And then the points thing as well. Just add to that. Points are one of the most frustrating things for me when you're building an army.
Hmm.
Like I've built so many lists. I'm like, cool, 40 points short. What do I have for
Yes.
40 points? Nothing. Nothing is
Nothing.
40 points. I'm
Yeah.
gonna have to take a unit out, then I'm missing. So yeah, that to me is that's why I'm up to chest height.
Yeah, it is. List building is so fun in this game, right? Like after every game I play, I come home and I sit down and like for another half an hour, and like, what can I do to make it more optimal, right? How can I make it more efficient, or should I try this thing, take this thing out? The list building is what makes this game amazing, I think.
Hmm. Touching on like what Ben just said as well, one of the frustrating things about, I say frustrating, I get why it happens, 100%, is like with 40k, for example, when they do a balanced data slate.
Hmm.
So your army is now 2010 points,
Right.
that kind of stuff. So like Old World has been out for just over a year and a couple of months. So what have they done any rebalancing on it or that kind of stuff with the points, or is it all just
No, no, they
out,
haven't really
out,
touched it.
that's it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
they released FAQs, and the
Hmm.
cool thing is because the game hasn't been out for that long, people are still figuring out what works and what doesn't. Right? So, for example, the double dragons are kind of the meme right now in the old world community because
Hmm.
if you have access to dragons and you bring two of them, you have a very strong army almost automatically, right? However,
Two dragons.
recent,
Okay.
yeah, two dragons, they have very strong toughness, they're hard to kill. But recently, we were playing around, testing things, and I was playing my friend Chuck, Strength Hammer. And he runs a double dragon list competitively. And I'm like, okay, well, let me see if my goblins have tools to dismantle your double dragon list. And they do. And I don't have dragons, right? So I think we're learning as the game, well, because this game is so vast, right? There's so many shenanigans and list building options that you have that we're still learning about it. So they really haven't rebalanced things yet.
That's kind of nice as well because whilst rebalancing stuff obviously helps the game state, I think if you take any time away from the hobby, so I'm using 40k as an example for me, I haven't played in about a year.
Hmm.
I was playing Tyranids the last time I played. Because there's so many updates, I don't know if the list that I had even is viable anymore.
Yep. Yep.
No, nothing drastic has changed as far as I'm aware, but I know that a couple of things have moved and your points have changed, and now they've got new. They got those Grotmas Christmas like battle regiments. So a lot of things have changed. And I think that's another barrier of entry that I think
Mm.
a lot of people struggle with. Whereas from what I can tell, the world's kind of like not stationary, but less jittery in that way,
I
if
suppose
that makes
it's giving
sense.
it room to breathe as well, isn't it? It's giving it
Yes,
that room for people to just pick it
It's
up, and
awesome.
then it's not a quarterly update, and you're having to change, chop and change all the time. So I guess, like, I mean, the assumption is that they've done a really good job of balancing it out of the box as well, which I think is the challenge with 40K and AOS. But Old World seems to have that balance and because you've got so much customization, like you said, Alex, even though you'd think goblins wouldn't stand a chance against dragons, actually they have got some tools. So if you build the list right,
Yep.
it doesn't
Exactly.
need balancing. You don't need to make each dragon 100 points more.
Yes.
You just
Yes.
need to basically come prepared.
The
yeah,
meta balances itself, right? So the
Mm.
dragons were like the big rage for like 4 or 5 months. We're like, how do we deal with how do we do this? Well, bring 9 fanatics, right? Or bring literally an artifact called the Dragon Slaying Sword. It's an expensive artifact, but
That's
give
what it
it
says on the tin.
right, give it to your beefy hero, bait the dragon to come into your unit. You have a 50-50 chance of killing dragon. Done, right? So it's expensive and you have to bait an enemy to do it, but you have options, right? So
Mm.
people are adapting to it without having to change points drastically.
that's nice. I do like that because there's been some games that you do play where it's just a hard counter
Yeah,
to what you're like. Someone brings a bunch of guard, and you have things that have a toughness that a guard simply cannot. Well, they could, but it's going to
sure,
have to be a volume thing.
sure.
There's a there's a bit of a bad taste in your mouth. Whereas I think if
Yeah.
you've got each army has okay, you have that cool thing. Well, I've got this thing that could deal with that.
Hmm.
You've got something that can deal with this, and so there's a bit of
Right.
a tit for tat rather than like just I'm going to steamroll you because you've just not got the right stuff here. So that flexibility and that fluidity from the units is
All hail Ollie, who's just
gonna
arrived.
say,
Ollie,
yeah,
yeah.
he's just
There he is.
here he
Hi,
goes.
buddy.
First
He's not
proper.
interested in Old World, I can tell.
Oh yeah, he's 100%,
He's like,
100%
not
in.
another army dad.
Yeah, another one. Yay, I get to rip another plastic box up. Cardboard. Sorry, cardboard. Not plastic.
Oh,
Yes.
yeah.
All right, so moving on to our last segment, which is gameplay, which is arguably maybe the most important segment. All right, so point number 7 is scale of battle and ease of movement. The scale of battle is grand, right? You have big regiments, you have big monsters, you have big artillery. To give you an example, my 2,000 point Goblin army has 7 heroes, almost 100 troops, 15 cavalry, 2 artillery, and 2 monsters, right? That's a lot of models on the table,
Mhm.
right? And I could actually bring way more hordes if I dropped the artillery and monsters, right? So the scale of battle much is much larger, which may seem daunting unless you have things like movement trays.
Hey.
So movement of 30 models literally takes seconds. You just measure from a corner, you move, done, move, done, move, done. Movement takes so much less time than moving individual models.
I'm damn near over this fence now. I don't know where my feet are at
Ben
this
says,
point.
I've got my long stick. I'm just going to shuffle them along, shuffle my armies forward. Advance!
I mean, so simple, right? And
Yeah.
so the scale is grand. You have big, vast armies facing each other on the battlefield, and there's ease of movement, and also generally there's much less terrain because you have bigger models to move. So there's less navigating, like moving models through terrain or taking them off movement trays. There's much less of that.
Yeah, that's actually something just briefly. Like I think I mentioned this in one of the podcasts. Whenever I was over in Canada and you came over very graciously to hang out with me and Callum as well. The thing I said about it about Old World was the fact that it was such an easy game to read.
Yeah,
Like you can look away from the table and look back, and you can pretty much see what's going on
you
because
know
of
what's
the
going on.
regimented look. And that's another
Yep.
thing. Whenever you were saying about all those models, I was just thinking like that must be In AOS, 40k, if you have 100 plus models on the board, good luck to your lower back.
Nightmare. Yeah.
Bending over moving every model individually,
Hmm.
whereas that, those movement trays, that rank and file, oh, that's why I'm now here because
Yeah.
that's a and visually just looks cool. Like
It's
that, the
cool.
Rome Total War,
So cool.
Total War Warhammer, that aesthetic of just rank and file. We said about this
Hmm.
before, but that's just very aesthetically pleasing for me.
Yeah.
So
I love that.
yeah, okay, okay.
Good, good, good.
All right.
Right, moving on. So the point number 8 is even though the game is very complex and there's a lot of rules to learn, there's a whole big thick rule book, right? The other side of it is the scenarios are very simple. So the complexity of the game is knowing your army and knowing your opponent's army and what they do and the rules of the game, not the actual scenario itself. Scenarios are simple, straightforward. There's no secondaries, there's no objectives. It's just classic slaughter,
Pitch battle.
right? So the goal is always to kill more points of your opponent than of yours. So you will have to preserve your points and kill opponent's points. And basically, there's like the major victory is if there's 1,000 point difference, right? So you killed 1,000 points more of your opponent than they did of you, right? So if they killed 500 points of you, you killed 1,500 points of them. That's a major victory. And then you have, I think, 750 or 500 is a minor, and then a draw is anything within 100 points.
Hmm.
I like that. So it's
Uh, yes, and you get more points for killing generals and banners. And so there's scenarios, and they will have other objectives like the watchtower. There's a thing in the middle. So there's different scenarios that will add a few extra points, but it's not game changing.
I like that.
So you're encouraged to get into battle. You're not just going to run around and score objectives and never engage.
It's yeah. At the end of the day, it's a combat game.
Yeah,
There's something weird when you're like, this model, these units and this model that I've sat painting aren't going to do nothing other than stand on an objective. It's kind of,
let's sit back and shoot. You don't have
yeah,
that.
you're just like,
You don't
"Ah,
have that.
all right. So they just got
Yeah,
weapons for the fun of it. I always imagine like those objective holders are literally just kind of like,
yep. How's your day going?
yeah, it's fine. Fine.
Yeah,
Wish I was over there fighting, but yeah, I just have to stand here and collect
right.
objectives. I like that. The fact it's just a pitch battle, classic, just smash into each other. Whoever smashes hardest wins.
But there's still, it might take away from you wanting to play because I just want to move forward and kill each other. But there's so much complexity with movement and flank. There's like flanking rules and rear charge rules, and you have so many units that can show up behind enemy lines, and then artillery. And it sounds simpler, but it's actually not. The positioning and movement is very important in this game. So it's not just run forward. Can I kill you better than you can kill me?
Yeah. That's what I
It's
experienced in
really
that
cool.
game as well. Like, the matching of certain units against other units. And as
Yes.
you said, it's simple but not easy.
Right.
Which I,
Right. And then
Complex rock, paper, scissors, isn't it? So
yes.
you'll
that's
have
it.
that across the board, and I like the other thing with the movement. The words rank and flank is that you've got round up, but if you can get round to the sides and you can flank people, particularly, you can do a lot
Huge.
more damage than if you just go in front face to face, and that's where the kind of the tactical and strategic element comes in, which I
Yes.
think is again perhaps sets Old World apart completely from AOS and 40k.
Yeah.
Yes. Like the flanking is so important and you never want to be flanked in this game, right? So for example, just to give you a taste of it, when you flank somebody, you get +1 to combat resolution, which determines
Mhm.
whether they will flee or not. They cannot use their ranks at all if you flank them. And they cannot use their leadership bonus for having models. So basically, you could have a very scary big unit, and if you manage to flank them with a smaller unit, they can just flee and you can overrun them easily. And that's like 500 points, 600 points of an enemy's army right there that you could have killed with 200 points easily because they positioned poorly or maybe you positioned well.
How
That's
does dice? Are you going to talk about dice rolling? Or is that one of your points?
Not really. I would say the dice rolls are just it's just a different system. I wouldn't
Yeah.
say it's too much different.
So I'm obviously used to 40k dice rolling.
Mhm.
And if I've got a squad of 10 orcs, for example, and they're going to do their shooting, then I'm rolling a ridiculously large amount of dice. But I know for something, if you're playing something like a Napoleonics game, which is probably more or probably closer in terms of the rule set to something like Old World, you
Mhm.
maybe only roll 3 or 4 dice, and it works on that. So where does kind of Old World sit in terms of how many dice you roll?
I would say it's a little bit less than AOS and 40k. It depends what phase you're looking at. So typically
Mm.
with shooting, you can roll a good number of dice because if you have like things that can fire in 2, 3 ranks, hills also matter in this game. So if you have a unit on a hill, you can typically shoot with more guys. If you have a line of sight, if you can shoot over your foot troops. Um, Combat is usually a little bit less. You're typically not rolling like 20 dice. I would say probably 20 is max you're going to roll in combat, and that's very optimistic. Usually it's closer to 10, 15. Um, you know, the attacks in combat is scaled down, I would say, from AOS, but doesn't mean it's any less bloody. Because then there's things like combat
Mm.
resolution and
Yeah.
fleeing, and the cool thing about combat in this game, also, I don't have that point, but it never stays in the same place. Because you could, if you break the unit a little bit, they'll give ground and they'll move 2 inches back and you can pursue.
Okay.
If you break them a little bit more, they will fall back in good order. So they're not quite fleeing, but almost. They will move d6 and you move d6. And then if you really break them, they'll flee. You can pursue them, and if you catch them, they're destroyed. So the cool thing is there's a lot of like if your units are kind of evenly matched, you'll have a lot of shifting back and forth in the battlefield.
Yeah.
So it's never stagnant staying in the same place.
Okay.
See this face? I think if you're watching this, if you just scrub back like 5 seconds, you'll see the immediate point where I went, yeah, okay. Okay. I'm
Turn
flopped
that
over
frown upside down.
Yeah.
Belly
down
flopped
the
over the
barbecue.
fence. He's now doing the worm towards the barbecue.
Yes, yo, what's up, guys? Any dwarves in that barbecue?
We have 2 more points, so we got to use those to get you
Get
over.
him
But I
over the
think one
line.
of them is going to be tough, but one should be good. Is magic. Everyone, unfortunately, except regular dwarves, but everyone has magic, and there's a lot of it. You can cast magic in every subphase. So your level 4 wizard that can cast 4 spells can actually cast 4 spells, right? So you can cast spells in command phase. You can cast spells in movement phase. You can cast spells in shooting phase. You can cast spells in combat, right? So the magic is vast. There's a lot of it, and you actually get to use it. And the cool thing is, like, I looked it up. Teclis, one of the strongest casters in AOS, can cast 4 spells. My level 4 Goblin Shaman can cast 4 spells,
I like
right? How cool is that? And
Yeah.
you can bring many of them. And also you could double dip usually for most of the spells. So if you have 3 casters that can cast Fireball, there's no reason why 3 casters cannot cast Fireball, which sometimes happens. Some lists bring 3 Fireball casters. So
that.
Oh,
magic is vast. There's a lot of it, and you actually get to use it, and it matters for the game.
Yeah.
sweet.
Well, as a dwarf player, then clearly I shouldn't like that too much. But
Yeah, well,
As a dwarf player, also you're in.
oh,
You're
I'm
in.
in.
You're
I'm
ready.
signing up. I'm here. I'm shoulder to shoulder.
I am
luckily,
buying my dwarf battle box.
Yeah,
as a dwarf player, you have 2 options. You could play Chaos Dwarfs, which do have magic because they are obviously contracting with the Chaos God,
Mhm.
Hashut, or you have a lot of options for anti-magic.
Okay.
So your units almost across the board have magic resistance. There's artifacts and heroes you can add to units to make the magic resistance harder. With the way it works, magic is usually pretty hard to cast. So the only semi-reliable way to do so is to bring a level 4 wizard, which is the strongest wizard in the game. And it's not uncommon to have a level 10 spell, right?
Cool.
Uh, so I would need to roll 10 plus on the dice to do it, but then you add 1 point per level of wizardly. So my level 4 would need to roll a 6 up for a 10 plus. However, something like dwarves, if you kit them outright, they could have magic resistance 4, which means you're adding 4 to my casting roll. So now I have to roll 14 on 2 dice, which means I need to roll 10 plus with my level 4, which is the best caster I have.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden, my magic that is I have my whole game plan around magic doesn't work well against you because you have magic resistance. Because you are just so dang stubborn.
Sounds about right. Yeah, yeah.
Sounds about right, Ben. Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds about right. That sounds good. Okay, okay. Yep.
Well, there we are. So that is well, that's 9 points. We've got 1 point less left to kind of tip. Well, I think Ben's already over the fence, but
Oh,
those
I'm already
if
making
you're not
middle-aged
already
man jokes.
convinced
All right, there,
to,
good, good, good.
I'm
to why
there.
you should get into old world, Alex, hit us with that last point.
So the last point, and that's the one personally for me, I think, is, you have heard of games that are hard to learn but easy to master.
Mhm.
You have heard of games that are easy to learn but hard to master. I would say AOS is one of those.
Yep.
Fantasy is hard to learn and hard to master, which may sound like a negative point. However, what that means is you will get so much gameplay out of it because you'll never get bored of it. You will always want to get better and always have room to grow. Like the game I played this Wednesday against Chuck, the Strength Hammer, we were learning that game, right? And I'm learning, oh, how does this unit work against me? What is this rule? How does this rule apply in this scenario? So it's to me it's very exciting. So you always have room to grow, always have room to learn. You will never, I think actually Ben, you mentioned in your podcast not too long ago, where you played against an AOS player who like knew exactly what they were doing and they didn't have to worry about it. They knew all the rules. They were almost like bored with their gameplay. That's not going to happen in fantasy because there's just so many rules that if you do that, you must be a genius.
I like that. The complex, and I assume there's a bit of a there must be a level of satisfaction that when you have tried something a few times and then it actually works for you, that
Yeah,
must be extremely satisfying.
yeah,
Again, equally frustrating, but I think if you've got the right mindset towards it, I think the juice is worth the squeeze. That's probably
yeah.
the best way to just to describe that. It's like, yeah, look, this is going to be difficult, but trust me, it will be worth every bit of effort you put into it, which
Yeah.
again, I appreciate that a lot.
And
That's
once you get the reps in, like, and the thing is, you will even know the rules, but you will forget because there's just so many, right? So you will never be bored of the game. Like, I played a game with Chuck and I knew he had this rule. He explained it to me, but I shot his unit. I declared them as a unit to shoot, but he has fall back rule, right? Which means when I declare them to shoot, they can fall back,
out of
right?
range.
And all of a sudden, they're out of range. And
Out
you
of
cannot
range.
declare another target once you shot. So basically, I shot them, they moved back, arrows fell short. How cool is that? And I knew that rule. I have that army, right? But because there's so many rules, I just forgot because I don't know. There's only so much your brain can handle. So it's cool because you'll never be bored with gameplay.
Like that. I do like that.
Yeah.
That's one of the biggest things I'd say is that, one of my concerns about it was that it is stationary. So how much can you get out of the game? But from what you've told me, the depth it's not super broad in terms of like the armies and the models,
Sure, sure, sure.
but it makes up for that lack of depth with or sorry, lack of like width by just being
Mhm.
super deep in terms of the rules, which is I like that. I do like that.
Yeah. And I think you do have more range than you would assume,
Yeah,
right? I mean the depending on the army, I would guess, but because I play primarily orcs and goblins, and I only play goblins. I don't even have any orc units, and I have more than plenty to choose from.
I've seen them. They're very nice.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you.
They're
Thank you.
very nice. Yeah. I've
So yeah,
also
that's my 10 reasons for
Well,
why to play Old World.
all
we're
right.
very, very grateful for that, Alex. Thank you very much. Now, I have got a question on the back of that, which perhaps you'll answer. But obviously, if anyone has got questions or queries or other reasons why you should get into all, well, let us know down in the comments. Now, I mean, we took a straw poll at the start of this where we kind of said, well, I'm kind of 9.9. I'm kind of already in the old world boat. Alex is captain of the boat. Ben was kind of like trying to get on board, not sure, but we think have we flopped you over the fence?
Oh yeah, I feel like I'm making like comments about the barbecue, about how hot it is, and like things that every
Yeah,
man does around a barbecue. Like, what temperature you got that?
yeah,
How'd you
Sure,
like
yeah.
sure,
that?
sure.
Yeah, I'm here.
Don't
I'm over
overcook
the
it.
fence. I'm over the fence. I'm
So
Good.
standing there beside you.
my question on the back of it then is, I mean, if somebody's listening to this or they're watching this podcast and thinking, oh, old world, I quite like the idea of that talking old world kind of low fantasy stuff. What's the best way for me to kind of get involved? What would you say, Alex, is the best way to kind of get involved in old world?
I would say the best way is go to oldworldbuilder.com. It's a free builder, and you have the beautiful thing about it is if you hover over any rule, it will tell you exactly what the rule is. And also it will, because like any game, there are certain restrictions on the way you army build, right? You need to have so many core units. You can only have up to so many heroes. And that sounds like restrictions. You have a lot of freedom there, right? I don't think I've ever maxed out on heroes, right? So you have a lot of options. I would make a list. I would start with 500 or 1,000 points. 500 point old world, super fun, super quick,
Mhm.
right? And there's only so much you're going to be able to build. And then eventually build up to 2,000 points. What I would say, just build an army that looks fun. Don't worry about it being good. Because even if you think it's good, it's probably not. For me to make my list that I think is competitive, I think it is, it probably took about 12 to 15 games, right? And I think it's competitive. I'm not even sure until I go to the tournament. We'll find out. So go to Old World Builder, build a list, or alternatively, you could just buy a starter set and build a list off that.
Like one of
Yes,
these.
like one of these. Yeah, yeah. And the reason why I said that those things are actually very affordable is because kit bashing is heavily encouraged in this army. And you could just take a regular foot troop model, heavily convert it and kit bash it, put it on a big rock. That's now your lord,
Yeah,
right?
those
That's now
things.
your priest. Just make sure it looks like one, and as long as it looks like it, you'll be just fine.
I do like
I
that.
think I was one of the. I've been on old world builder looking at high elf armies because I did that classic thing of rather than understand the game, I'm just going to see what I've won tournaments, and
Yeah,
what has won tournaments is absolutely nothing like how I build it. Like if I was going to
right.
build a high elf army, I would have rows of spearmen, I'd have blocks
Yep.
of archers, I'd have sword masters. Whereas you look at the lists that are winning, they you know
Dragons.
lords on dragons, and they're probably min-maxed in terms of the kind of stuff like that. But it is a really good actual way of, even if you just take the battalion box and you put the contents of the battalion box in there, see how many points you got. It's a really good starter point. And I think that's the one thing again that's really good about Old World is those battalion boxes are really good value, and you've got
Very
a lot
good
of
value.
stuff in them. And I'm just thinking about the
Very.
Bretonnian box. There's so much stuff in the Bretonnian box. It's absolutely insane. But also the high elf one is really good as well because you get two chariots in there, and it's just really really awesome. So I guess we hopefully we've kind of convinced you. Hopefully Alex is me and Ben have just kind of sat here and fanboyed along. So hopefully Alex has convinced you to get involved in Old World. Let us know down in the comments if you have been convinced, and if you've enjoyed this podcast, make sure you like and subscribe as well because it does help us in terms of growing and increasing our reach to get to more hobbyists. But with that, thank you guys so much for watching and listening, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you very much.
I
Bye.